Hey guys, it's Doa. You may think to yourself, hey, Doa's too nice to be on Thorin's channel. Why is he there? And you're right. He's locked me in his closet, and I'm being forced to record this. Help?
By the way, since you said you did, of all the games, the infamous World of Tanks, right, I actually do know some people from the Counter-Strike world, Pansy and a few other people, who also, if you worked for ESL back then, they often would get told, because it was like one of the jobs that ESL did as like, you know, a white label production or something. So they would also tell them, like, look, you're also on World of Tanks this week. And I can tell you, they told me that was the worst game to work, Susie, because the problem is, look, one, it's a really niche game. It really is like a war simulator. And when I say simulator, I don't mean like, because of video, I mean as in like, supposedly, like, as far as I know, it's something like you have a whole team of people controlling one tank, and it really is like one guy controls the turret or whatever, one guy drives it somewhere. But it's like, it's super complicated. I've heard like it's not something you just get into in a day, right? That sounds like a tricky game to cast.
So the esports aspect and the actual game were different.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and I believe what we would just do it was a 5v5 on a map, and they would choose a map, and there was only a list of tanks that they could pick from.
Right.
So you can't even, it's almost like if it was League of Legends, it'd be like, here are the 15 characters that you could choose from, and you can't deviate because that's what it is for this season.
Right.
And so because of that, it was a little bit easier that you can learn the tanks. That's actually how I started talking to Uber, because I knew he was doing World of Tanks over at ESL. And I was like, dude, I have to do Asia, and I don't know.
Right.
Like, can we talk about, like, can you tell me what tanks are being used over in Europe so that I can make those comparisons and stuff? See, this is what I mean. Like, esports is a lot of everyone kind of connecting with each other because we're doing these jobs. And it's fun. And again, I'm not afraid to talk to new people or anything like that. So it was like, well, how can I get information the quickest? Let's talk to the guy who's been casting it. And, but yeah, I even reached out to some of the team, like on Twitter. Some of the Asian team leaders followed me on Twitter. So then I would message them and be like, hey, you obviously know that I suck at this. Can you help me out? And they're like, no, we're just glad that you're doing it.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Love you.
Yeah.
And I got to, when I think OGN did the finals and flew the teams in to the Yongsan studio, and they were like all really excited to meet me and Wolf, and it was fun. But again, it was stuff like that that's small and niche and community-based and community-driven. That's the part I love of it. So
one of the things that was interesting around the time when you were like going back to Korea, as well as obviously you were kind of still working multiple games. Like you did the StarCraft stuff where you'd be a host or a translator, but then there would be some League of Legends stuff. Like one thing I wanted to ask was was it like a mixed bag as to when you would actually get to do like League of Legends stuff? Like I noticed you didn't do all of it, but you did some, and then sometimes you'd be hopping out, you'd be going to Sweden for DreamHack, or you'd be going to do something in America for StarCraft. What was the vibe on that? Like it wasn't because normally in Korea people tend to work for like one studio like OGN, that you just do their stuff. So how were you like more of a freelance person?
I was always freelance. I think I worked for OGN for 3 months. They put me on the global team for a little bit. But overall, it was, I think I started working at Twitch around that time. And Twitch allowed me to, because I was working with partnerships and stuff like that, they also were okay with me hosting and or casting or doing freelance gigs. And so that's probably why my main goal was to find teams and find people to stream on Twitch. A fun story, like I helped instigate, SKT1 to get on Twitch.
Oh, okay.
In the very, very beginning. And it ended up becoming a much bigger corporate deal. So someone else took over, obviously, who had higher pay grade than I did. But I pushed really hard for that and got them those meetings to do it. Unfortunately, Twitch isn't in Korea anymore. So.
Sure. No, but I remember at the time when the day Faker streamed on Twitch, it was like insane. I remember everyone was going mental. It was like happening,
Yeah. But yeah, it's been a lot of good times over the years. But yeah, that's probably why I would do like the occasional dream hack, and I knew people. I just like knew people from ESL and whatnot, and then they would ask me if I wanted to do it or anything. Like I never had an agent. I never had anyone I worked with. It was just all kind of invitation, and yeah, I did it until I didn't.
Because one thing I always wondered, and I want to ask you, was like, put it this way, I'll give everyone a very brief anecdote. One time when I was living in Korea in the early days, like so I'd say 2014, 2015, around this time period, when I was living there, but I just lived there out of choice. Like I did all my work in the West. I've never had any connection whatsoever to Korean esports. I've never worked in any company that was a Korean esports. I was just doing it. That's where I lived, and then I worked elsewhere. At the time, me and you both flew to Sweden for a DreamHack where you were doing like StarCraft or something. I think it was, I would have probably needed WCS or something. You were doing StarCraft and I was doing like the Counter-Strike tournament. I remember thinking at the time, well, it makes sense why I don't work in Korea because I have no connection to Koreans. I don't even speak Korean. But in your case, you just tended to only do all the Western stuff. I always wondered, why didn't they ever bring you on to like the OGN broadcast, but for the English language one? Why were you never is there a reason you never got that gig? Because to me in the West, you were one of like 3 people that you could hire to even do these jobs. So you would have been a shoo-in. Is there a reason the Koreans didn't see it the same way?
To do, I'm not sure what you mean. Like, why wouldn't OGN hire me to do StarCraft?
Put it this way, if it was me, I would have had you doing the role like G-Sun does now on LCK, but from like day one, you seem like an obvious shoo-in to do it. To be on the English broadcast, but to be the person who does the Korean translations and helps. Why weren't you that person?
My Korean is good, but I want to say my English is better.
Right.
Where I think in Ji-sun's case, her Korean is better and her English is very good.
Right.
And I think that's the difference, because then she can catch the nuances of what the Korean players are saying better than I can. And, you know, I fully acknowledge that. But I mean, I think in the old days, like, Riot and I didn't really get along either.
Okay. Any reason?
And so,
Any reason?
I don't know if you know this about me, Thorin, but I am a little outspoken.
Okay. I've noticed it once or twice.
And I don't know if you know this, but I was dating this guy named MonteCristo.
That doesn't help. Okay.
No.
He's also been known to get on the wrong side of Riot, out of choice or not. True. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, they're small little factors.
Sure.
And I think in an interview once, like very early on, like in 2013 or early 14, someone asked me like, "Oh, you know, would you like to know?" I was like, "I would love to host Worlds." You know, I think I had said that, and you know, I knew that was never going to happen. But yeah, so here I am. But I'm perfectly happy having done all of those games and freelancing, being able to do ESL and then DreamHack and over the years, like I've become friends with a lot of the players, and to a point where, you know, a lot of them would call me Nuna, which is older sister. And I think having that rapport also makes interviews a lot more fun and makes it a lot more comfortable. I think, maybe it started off, I worked with ESL and they sent me over was because they needed someone for the China and Taiwan stops, and it was cheaper to fly me from Korea than it is to fly someone from, you know, from the States or whatever. But I think I got to host once. I got to host an ESL thing in Taiwan or Shenzhen maybe, because I think Red Eye was supposed to do it, and his flight didn't get in on time,
right,
or something like that. So I think that was the first time I got to host an event. And then people realized I can. So,
by the way, along those lines, another thing I want to ask you is this. I actually feel like, funny enough, when you bring that up, another person this reminds me of is Smix, because I got to work with her a bit in Counter-Strike a couple of years after this, because she was just doing whatever the big games were, because I think people recognise she's just really talented at what she does. And she's another person that would do all this research, and she would try to talk to the players like you're talking about and be like super friendly with them. Like obviously they were treating her like the little sister or whatever. And basically, because she did that though, she was connecting with the game in a totally different way to me. So I've often told this anecdote, that one time there was like an epic semi-final, you know, like, I can't remember if it was like a major or something. It was like some massive epic game in Counter-Strike. And we were all hyped because it's like an amazing game. You're like, what, Team A versus Team B, who will make it to the final? And then she was really invested and she was getting all emotional. I was like, what, are you a big fan of that team? And she goes, no, like, because she knew both like the star players. Her whole thing was like, I just don't want, one of them has to lose and I'm just sad for him. And I was like, what the who cares about that? Like, we're battle, we're just seeing who's the best. Like, but what it made me realise was she was connected on a human level the way I wasn't. To me, you know, that's just player A and he's the star player. I'm building the narrative like outside the game, as it were, you know, he's this epic player. She was connecting with them on a human level though. I feel like you've always done the same thing. When you get to know these players, you do have like a human relationship beyond just the interview, right? You try to befriend them a bit.
Yeah, of course. And that's how you get better interviews, because you're able to ask the right questions and you know how they're going to answer, or, you know, at least get a gist of it. For me, a lot of the players were a lot younger, and so the dynamic was different in that, you know, I'm like this older sister and I have to listen to her, and, you know, in Korean they use a lot of honorifics with me, and that was different. But I think with Smix, and her benefit was that she was the same age as all of them,
right?
And so she was able to actually be their friend and actually hang out and, you know, use common Korean language and just be familiar with them and joke around in a way that I never could. And, you know, Smix was very good at getting to know people and making those connections. And, you know, yeah, she has a big heart. So, of course, once you know the storylines and once you know the players and they become your friends, like, you don't want anyone to lose. I feel that way too.
Sure. By the way, along those lines as well, I actually want to ask you a strange question, because I feel like one thing that annoys me about sort of the woke era of esports is it actually just shuts down a lot of interesting conversations. Like, people feel like because you have to pretend men and women are exactly identically the same, then you can't ask a question like this, which is, I actually feel like at that type of interview, but spoiler, I'm an interviewer myself. I'm actually, some would say I'm doing an interview right now, debatable. But basically, I actually do think for that particular type of interview, I actually think a lot of the women in the scene seem better suited than men, because actually a lot of the men I know don't try to connect in that way with the player. They maybe have more professional stance, or it's more like, even if they know the player as a friend, sometimes they feel awkward from that. Actually, like, should I say something when I know he knows something about it? I think it makes it more complicated. Whereas we're actually having this debate right now in Counter-Strike. At the major in Counter-Strike, we're doing it now where every person who gets eliminated does an exit interview. So unfortunately, you get those interviews where people might be really emotional, or you might have no clue what they're going to say. Like, they might say something that could damage themselves or their team. And I feel like you have to be so skilled handling what the emotional state there is. And I don't know about you, but I actually think not all women, but some of the women I've known would be the best at that job. I feel like they want to connect with the player that way. They also care about how he's feeling and what he's going through. So what would you say to this topic? I feel like you should have some insight.
I guess it's a very generalized. I'm thinking of the people that I know in this space, and amongst those people, yes, I think the women would do a better job. However, I think also if the men interviewers went that extra step and tried to connect on a personal level, like that could be fine too. You know what I mean? It really depends on the comfort level of the interviewer and the player themselves. And I mean, one thing that they might be able to do is prep. Like, if they lose, what can I ask you? And ask them that beforehand. You know, like, hey, if you win, I think I'm going to ask you this question. Right. And so, you know, this is, so you can answer it however you want. Or, hey, if you lose, like, I might ask you this. Is that okay? And if they're like, no, dude, if I lose, I'm just going to like flip my top. I hate this, you know, then you don't. But I think it is a lot of that prep and going that extra mile to kind of let them know. And especially, like you said, in a situation where if they lose and they're just like really emotional, you know, you're not going to like happily be like, hey, so you lost, you know? But I think also giving them a heads up of, this is probably what I'm going to ask you, you know, would you be cool with that? And then that way they can actually like compose themselves, think about the answer. And then when you do ask it, be able to say it in a professional manner and not damn themselves. Because I think a lot of times I remember a lot of the players who weren't very good on camera, beforehand I would tell them
Oh,
what I'm
right.
going to ask and be like, hey, if I ask this, here are your options of how you might be able to answer so that we have a real interview instead of you being like, yes, no, you know? And then I would kind of coach them along, which is something that esports always lacked. You know, whenever I watch the documentaries on the NFL of the players and stuff, like every time they have an interview, I'm just like, man, media training is so important. They
Yes.
are so eloquent. They
Yeah.
are able to get their thoughts and feelings across without crossing lines. And we never had media training for any esport. And so that was kind of my attempt at it, like letting them know I'm going to ask this, or I'm probably going to touch upon these subjects. How would you answer them? And can you give me an answer that's beyond a one-word answer? And I think that I was somewhat successful with that. And because they're able to at least think about it for a moment and then say something other than yes or no, I will show you good games. Please cheer for me.
I have a question like that
So,
then. And it feels like you're the perfect person to answer it, which is, in the modern day, part of the fandom of these players in the West is that some of them have really big personalities. Some of them are actually quite fun. Some of them even, the joke is people like GOMtv and people like Bin from China, some of them even lead into the memes and sort of seem like they have like a character themselves. But none of that to me came across that much in the early days. In fact, famously, it was in StarCraft 2 where the Western fans had that crazy meme of like the faceless Korean, where it's like some insane player in the game who destroys you, but the problem is in the interview you get nothing from him and you're just like, is he a bloody robot? Like, what? Again, the problem is I've learned a bit like, you know, WWE wrestling, people do need the character to connect to. It can't just be how good you are at the video game. So in your case, what I want to ask was, is there something about like Korean culture where like, did these players in Korean, would they have sounded the same? Would they also have seemed a little bit like overly stoic or a bit professional? Was there a reason why more personality didn't bleed out early on, do you think?
humility is important. You know, you want to be humble. You don't want to be like, oh yeah, you know, I kicked his ass and then lose the next time, and then all the fans are like,
Right.
you suck, you know. But humility is big, and you don't really want to call attention to yourself. And I think that is a very Korean trait. I think now that the game is, I guess players realizing that it's entertainment as well. And being that they have more Western fans, there are some players who are happy to get out of their shells. Like, you know, MC comes to mind. Like Mincho he played into it and he was great. Parting, another one, big personalities, and Gesture in Overwatch. And with Overwatch, you start to see more. Like Jonak was a big personality. You just get these guys who like point at the camera and, you know, give these yeah. And I think the broadcast teams have also learned that that kind of thing sells, because they started, OGN did the whole trash talk segments before finals, you know. And if you watch the trash talk segments over time, like they do get a little feistier. As the years go on, because they realize, oh, I can say this, like, oh, it's allowed, and they're finally getting the okay to do it. But yeah, in the early days, it was very much like show through your actions, not through your words, kind of thing. You know, like be humble about your win, and please cheer for me. I will show you good games, and I played well, but I could have played better. You know, like it was always stuff like that. No, I'm glad people are coming out of their shells now and really becoming that character, that entertainment figure, because that's what esports is, entertainment.
By the way, along those lines, on the infamous cheer for me and I'll show good games, I'll give you a quick anecdote. In the West, in Counter-Strike, when Simple, the Ukrainian player, who's known to be very spicy and incendiary in his remarks, he's made crazy comments about everyone. In theory, right, when he was the number one player, his team wasn't number one, so they would sometimes lose the game, right? Even though in the game he'd have done like the craziest performance anyone ever seen, and everyone. The joke is, even the team that won used to say, yeah, he was the best player, like he was just that good, right? But in interviews, he would do a similar thing, Susie, because at the time he'd learned from being an asshole too many years earlier. I know this guy, it is true. He just learned to say, even if you like clearly were the best player of the whole server and it wasn't really your fault you lose, he learned you can't really go like, well, I played awesome, what the fuck were they doing? He learned what you have to do is go, maybe I could have played even better. You know, you have to do that, right? But the difference is that was like a really rare outlier that anyone would ever think that way in the West. Everyone was like, what the fuck? And in fact, it made him seem cooler. It was like, wow, he must have such a mindset to be the best. But pretty much by default, Koreans do that. Like, I've seen matches where people like Chovy, where they carried the whole game, and at the end, their teammate fucked it up. And in the interview, they don't say anything. They just do the, you know, I'm sorry to my fans, I'll try better next time to try and win. And I always tell people, that's not fake, though. That's real. Like, a lot of the Koreans really do have the mentality that if you lose, on some level, it must be your fault. You still, maybe you did need to practice harder. Like, can you explain this to people? Like, there's just a sense that, like, the result, it matters the most to someone. But how do you explain it?
The team is their family. Like, you're not going to call anyone out, you know? And I will tell you this, off camera, they will talk shit to each other.
Okay.
I mean, that's just human nature. They know each other well enough. They'll be like, you know, why did you do that? And blah, blah, blah. And like, we totally had it, but blah, you know, and they'll do it. But Korean esports players had a little bit of media training in that because they also don't want to piss off their owners, I guess. And you don't want negative publicity ever because that's money. And so it's just best to go the humble route. You can always do better. You can always, yeah. No one likes a braggart.
By the way, along these lines, something I want to, I don't want to, you can decide how you answer this, but one thing I thought was interesting about Korean culture I wanted to introduce Western fans to is I remember a story in the StarCraft 2 days, and as far as I know, this still happens to this day, and it goes like this. When Boxer had that team, Slayers, where his wife, that Jessica, that famous actress in Korea, helped run it, I remember a story once that was like, she's suing some like trolls on the internet for taking like Toss Girl or something, that famous girl that played, and like being mean in photoshops of her and posting like the equivalent of like, you know, Korean fortune or something. I remember going suing them, and I found out that in Korea, basically, it's not like America with all like freedom of speech. Like basically, if people say things that are like really derogatory or rude about you, you can actually sue them. And I've heard in the modern day, not just them threatened, but I've heard T1's done this to people who they think have crossed the line, or they're like you know, like a dedicated hater who just does. Can you explain that this is a real thing in Korea? Like basically, if you're a troll, you can get sued or you can get in trouble for it.
Yeah, that's why it's. I want to say that's why people remain anonymous.
Right.
A lot of the time, Koreans do sue a lot. You think Americans sue a lot? Koreans sue a lot, and I see it not in the esports form, but like. Because, again, I know this comes as a shock, but I am an educator here in Korea. I worked with a bunch of schools as well. And I've been working part-time here and there at like international schools and, you know, teaching English. But some of the big international schools, they have lots of scandals where parents will sue like a student saying that student said something mean to their kid.
Okay.
And it could be something like they're hanging out and they're friends, and he'll be like, "Man, you're such a whatever, you know, you're such a jerk," and like hit him on the shoulder. And they'll be like, "Look, he's abusing him." Okay. And then take that CCTV and go sue the family and be like, "Hey, my kid has emotional damage because of that, and you have to pay." So I see it a lot in the academic.
Okay. So it's more widespread. It's not just esports. I say, right? Okay.
It's not just esports, but seeing that, what the story you just told me, like came at me, and I got to a point where I was like, maybe I could sue them, and so I had to like print out all the terrible things, and then
Okay.
I went to a police office, and they said I can actually sue them, and they can find who these people are. But it was just so much work. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I don't care that much. But I know it's possible because I looked into it.
Sure. Because one thing I feel like this builds into is when people see this K-popification of the T1 fan base and that bizarre dynamic, at least to a Westerner, where when they don't like how the team's going, the way they protest is they hire all those trucks and they put the message on there. And it'll be like, I mean, the joke this year was it was a message to the CEO, like, basically telling Joe Marshall, stay the fuck out. Like, we're dealing with this. Like, shut up, you'd stop having it. So, like, to me, that's really weird because I get the idea online, people post a tweet or something like that. In Korean culture, is the idea that even your audience or your fan, but you're somehow accountable to them in a way. Like, this is like an accepted thing.
Yeah. You just want to keep the general masses happy. I think that's what it comes down to.
Okay.
It's sad, but like, Monte and I talk about that a lot in Korean culture. Like, why don't they stick to their guns? Why don't they just like push through with what? But it's a very collectivistic society, and I think it's easier for big corporations to just please the masses than become, get attacked and then get canceled or, whatever it is. So, yeah. I think it is commonplace, unfortunately.
Right, being as when you lived in America, you originally it was New Jersey you lived in, right?
That's where I grew up, yeah.
Right. When you then got with Monte and you came to America, obviously for OverWatch League, it was LA that you went to. Now, some people, it might be very glamorous to go to LA. Maybe that's their dream. Did you actually want to move to LA from Korea?
I didn't want to move back to the States at all.
Right.
But,
okay.
But, LA wasn't, it wasn't terrible. No, I liked it. I liked it more than Monte did. I know Monte didn't really like his time there. But I enjoyed it. The weather is fantastic. I have to say it. That can't be beat.
Sure.
But while we were there, it was a lot of working and again, towards the end, it was, I had a child, and then it was all about raising this child and then creating a community. I actually liked LA better once I had Max.
Oh, okay.
Because then I started to meet people who were actually from LA and not in the entertainment.
Right. Is there is there a significant difference?
Yeah. You meet a lot of people who are there for the entertainment industry who are from everywhere else but not LA, and they are friendly to your face because they want to get ahead.
Social climbers and that, right? Right.
Yeah, and I want to say, I probably didn't hang out a whole lot with those people, but I knew they existed, and the esports scene in LA was definitely younger and different than what I was used to in Korea. So we basically kept to ourselves, the Overwatch, casters and crew, because we were all a lot older. Like, the people working in esports, I think, were just 10 to 15 years younger than we were at that point. And then again, so then I have a child, and I start to meet a collection of people who also have children. And then I start meeting people who are not in the entertainment industry and who actually just are from Los Angeles, where they're born and raised from Los Angeles. And I was like, oh, this is very different. And I think I liked the city a lot more at that point.
Right. When you went to live in LA, obviously one of the jobs you were able to get this is when you got that job as the general manager of the London Spitfire, which, if people don't know, when they did the Overwatch League, even the endemic brands that came in, so this was Cloud9 in this case, had to make a separate brand just for Overwatch League, because they hoped it would obviously be like the NFL one day, and it'd be this grand thing. And they made the London Spitfire, even though the joke was it was a Korean team of players and they're a North American org. So I never quite understood how. I know it's because eventually the idea was, it would branch out to the whole world, and we'd be going and having the home games, then we go into the other places, etc. Right? How do you land this gig? Was the fact that it was going to be Korean players essential to it? How do you get the gig as this job, Susie?
Yeah, it was, they had Korean players, and I don't even remember, honestly. I was talking with Jack, who is the owner of Cloud9, and I was at the Overwatch League studios because I was with Twitch still at that time, and they were not doing well, and I think they just, they were just like unhappy with X, Y, and Z, and I think I just said something like, who's your manager for this team? And they had someone, but it wasn't for London Spitfire. It was like the general manager for a lot of the Cloud9 organizations, and I was like, you should just hire me to be the general manager. And he was just like, yeah, okay. And so we talked about it. And I think with the general manager job, I just basically became their mom and helped take care of all the little things like housing, food, where can I get this? Like, how do I get my social security number? How do I, all these things. And I had Robin, who also helped a lot. And eventually when we moved into the team house, Robin lived with them. And then Robin eventually took over as their GM when they moved me to do something else.
By the way, what was it like to actually win the first season then? It must be cool to be connected in a way that's not just like you're friends with the player. You're actually involved with the process at some level.
That was incredible. It was the first time I was on stage for an event for actually winning something. Because mind you, I've been on stage as a caster, as a host, like on the sideline, like whatever. But to be a part of an organization who won the whole thing, like there's a picture of me and Mateus, who was the social media manager at the time. We're just like crying on stage because we were super happy. And it was fantastic. It was the very first season of Overwatch League when things were very hopeful and wonderful. And, it was done in New York, which was also very meaningful to me because I grew up in New Jersey, and, New York is my home city, I guess. New Jersey doesn't really have.
The idea there'd be a massive esports thing in a stadium there would have been crazy when you were growing up in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's at the Barclays. Also, it's where the New Jersey Nets play.
Yep.
And I was a huge Nets fan, like all through high school and college, and so it was really surreal that I was in New York. I'm sharing this stage where like the Nets would play, and like with my team who just won, and like also with like these boys that I've spent so much time with. And yeah, it was pretty awesome. It was definitely like top 10, one of like the best memories,
This is something I want to ask about because I feel like too many people now just cynically are like Captain Hindsight about the Overwatch League. Like, it never could have worked. It was always good. But what people don't realise is, I'll give you an example. When I first heard the concept from Monte, I did tell him a bunch of like structural issues. Like, mate, I don't know how they're going to have like a league, but you're in different continents and you somehow play a game still. And I feel like the logistics will get crazy. But I just meant more like down the line, you're going to have to figure that out. At the same time, when someone told me they're going to do a giant esports league where they're going to have like broadcast rights sales. It's not just going to be like Cloud9 and TSM. It's going to be like the real esport, like real sports franchises are going to buy in and massive game devs. At the time, the reason why everyone was optimistic is that sounds like we're at least going to try it. No one's just going to say, oh, no, forget that, we won't even bother. That sounded like it could be like the next level for esports. Also, this is around the similar time that like in Counter-Strike, for example, we'd done E-League on TV, etc. It actually felt like at the time maybe things were going to blow up in LA. Maybe the North American side, which had a lot of obviously investment money, maybe it was going to become some massive phenomenon. Were you also similarly hopeful? Did you think maybe it can work? Like, I mean, if it had gone well, maybe you could have been working there today.
Yeah, we were all hopeful. We really wanted to watch it grow. We really put in a lot of our thoughts. I think there was a clash between people who knew broadcasting in a traditional NFL sense, and then those of us who have been in esports and homegrown esports.
Right.
And the big dogs thinking that they could do it better than us. And I feel like they kind of drove it to the ground. And I mean, maybe there were other factors too that I don't know about, but I do know there were just several things where, when people from esports would voice our concerns about X, Y, and Z, it would just be like, no, this is how we do it on national TV, or no, this is how we've always done it. And there were a lot. I also, I'm like, do I say this? There were a lot of people who had come to Overwatch League, who had left the NFL and or bigger broadcasts, and or were let go by these bigger broadcasts. Right. Which leads me to believe, like, if you were let go, wouldn't you think that it's because you suck?
Like, right.
Or just like maybe you were doing something wrong, and you could have another perspective from all of us who have been literally doing this and growing esports on the whole. And Overwatch had casters from all different games. We had like Puckett and Mr. X coming from Call of Duty, and then you had Monte and Doa coming from League of Legends. We had
loads of people. Semler from CS. We had loads of different people.
Semler from CS. Exactly. Like, you just had people from all different backgrounds with so much experience, and not just like 1 or 2 years experience. Like, all of us at that point had 10 years of experience of traveling the world and working with players and doing this. And I feel like those running Overwatch League just completely dismissed that.
Right.
So a part of me feels like it could have been big. It really could have been something great for at least a bit longer than it did. It lasted.
Sure.
But it was just very mismanaged, and unfortunate how that all panned out.
I'll make this really open-ended so you can decide how to answer it. But I did want to ask a question, if you're comfortable with it, which is listen, when you say scandal in esports, again, remember, a lot of this is on Twitter and the internet. That just means one day a bunch of people got mad and did tweets about it. We're not really talking scandals like the Watergate scandal and then people have to resign and, it's some life-changing effect. So I remember during your time as the Spitfire GM, there was an incident where basically fans became briefly aware of what now surely in the 10 years later, everyone knows happens around the world, which is even cultural things are regionalized based on the audience. So the joke people might know is there's an infamous meme that when it's Pride Day, if you go on to, I'll give you an example. I use Bethesda, the publisher. And if you go to, Bethesda USA in Europe, they'll have like Pride Week, everything. Guys, we love gay people and we accept that. But then the joke is if you ever go to that same account, but it's the Middle East account or the Chinese, it's not going to put anything. That's just going to be, it's Tuesday or whatever. How you doing in the game? And they're purposely not going to put that because in their culture, they just don't have the same cultural norms. And basically a very similar thing happened, which was when they did, and people will know Overwatch was a game that in the West at least maybe did lead into some of this like adjacent to political thinking. When they did all the stuff in the West, people were loving it. All the people on the forums were into it. But then basically when they did the broadcast in China and Korea, they didn't show any of this on the broadcast. That wasn't there because for whatever reasons, again, different cultural norms. What I remember from my memory, maybe I'm off on this, is you just essentially just pointed this out. You just pointed out like, look, they're not going to in Korea show that the things in the same way, or they have their own sort of like please essentially respect that they have a different cultural set of decisions than you, or they're not in the same place. And people treated this as you were like anti this particular topic, like you hate gay people, or you're making some outrageous political statement, which as far as I can tell, you never work. Is there something you can say to this?
My political statement, it wasn't political. My statement was basically, why are you forcing, like, number one, I don't think you should force players to, wear rainbows around if they themselves don't want to do it.
Right.
And that's not saying like they hate gay people. It's saying everyone has their own comfort level and they need to work with that. And so if you are more than happy to, decorate yourself with rainbow things, like great, do it. But I think it needs to come from the player themselves, not a team demanding it, because then that's not genuine at all. And yes, I did point out the fact that in Korea and China and probably the Middle East, like, that's just where they are currently in the scheme of things. And it's almost like, did you forget that America also went through growing pains with gays, you know? And did you forget that even before that, there were growing pains about women? And, you know, like, every culture and every, like, country has their own timeline of where they are with these kinds of, I don't want to say situations, but with these kinds of issues.
Sure.
And, you know, being that the broadcast was in America and it was a very American, you know, June being Pride Month is a very American holiday. And forcing it, I thought, was not correct. I think if you want to celebrate Pride Day because you genuinely want to, great. Like, I am, you know, I support that decision. But yeah, so that's what I had said. But, you know, apparently I hate gay people now. So,
because like I said, it was like a mini storm in a teacup scandal, which I also think is kind of interesting in light of that today. The fact that I feel like all of a sudden, Susie, the entire industry is on your side in that exact respect, because that's what they do with all the Saudi stuff. Like, now it's become awkward for everyone, hasn't it? In the same way as people can see on their social media one thing, they know if they go and work EWC, they're not going to be doing that there. Like, that's no one's even bothered. I feel like people have understood now what the lines that go around the world that divide us up, you know.
No. I think people just like to bandwagon.
Could be that too.
It's hard because you can think one thing and act in a different way because you have other priorities. Like, for example, you know, if you get a job that's going to pay you a whole lot, but it's in Saudi Arabia, and you yourself are gay, you can either make that decision of like, oh, you know, I'm going to stand for my rights and not go. But if you're like struggling to pay rent and you can't feed your family and like, and they're offering you like 2-3 times the amount that you normally would, like, I that's a very real situation.
Sure.
Where if I'm super rich, yeah, I'm going to stick to my guns. Like, ethically, I can't do that. But like, if that money's going to put food on the table for my family, like, I totally can understand that struggle and why people do it. And, you know, that's their decision, and I cannot judge them one way or another. I guess my whole ordeal is like, that's fine, but don't be that person who's like, pride, yeah, women's rights, like, whoa, whoa, like, totally loud and like, you know, in your face about it, and then they're like, okay, now I'm gonna go to Saudi.
Sure.
Like, why call attention to it? Is my take. I don't know. Someone's going to watch this and then think that I'm hating on people now.
Of course. By the way, how did you handle that, though? Because I feel like, look, I mean, I've no doubt everyone gets negative internet comments, but right up until that point, surely in general, you've had a fairly good relationship with fans, etc. Like, people have been appreciative of things you've done. You've been quite popular. Like, what was it like to be the villain for the day?
It sucked. You know, I'm not used to that. And, you know, I'm not you or Monte. My skin is thick enough that I understand where that's coming from, but it still hurt. You know, it hurt because I felt like people were putting words in my mouth that I wasn't saying. And the silver lining, though, was I actually had a lot of people, because my DMs are open. I had a lot of people message me privately and be like, hey, Susie, I agree with you.
Oh, okay.
I had people be like, Susie, I'm gay, and I also hate that people do this. Like, why are you putting politics in my game?
Right.
I had lots of people being like, I hope you're not too, you know, sad about it, and a lot of supportive words. And I think that's kind of what helped me get over it. But I also think that happened right around the time I was finishing up my time with London Spitfire, and moving on to something else. And it was kind of like well, if that's how everyone sees me, then whatever, this too shall pass.
Sure.
And then I had a baby. And then I was like, hey, you know what? This is so much more important than what any internet troll is going to say about me. I need to keep a human being alive. So, you know what? My perspective and I guess all my priorities kind of shifted. And it was very easy for me to let go of things in esports to concentrate on things that really mattered.
Like, obviously, even if you hadn't have had a relationship with Monte, I might have asked about him in this interview anyway, because he was a friend of yours and we were around a similar circle 10 plus years ago. But since you have a relationship with him, I want to ask a question I never thought I would be asking on camera, but we'll just do it. What attracted you to MonteCristo? By the way, also, I know I should say Christopher, but I don't think I've ever called him Christopher in my entire life. To me, he's just Monte. The joke is his first name is Monte to me. That's just the way I'm in esports. So what attracted you to Monte? What was interesting about this guy?
Wow. These are the hard-hitting questions that you're asking in the Reflections interview. He was very direct and he was very genuine. And just I liked his confidence when we first met. And over time, as I started to get to know him, he's very fiercely loyal. He is very responsible. I don't know. Just in general, I liked him. I liked who he was. I liked that he voiced his opinions and he didn't really care what other people thought. I liked that, when he decided he's going to do something, like he actually did it. Like he would put things into action and he wasn't all talk. I liked that he had big dreams. And I thought he was hot.
That helps too. And listen, we've all seen those old photos where he had the leather jacket on, the long hair or whatever.
I didn't even meet him at that time. I met him during his choo-choo train era.
Okay. And also, to be fair, I also thought one thing I was actually underrated about Monte was he put a lot more effort in the early days into looking slick on camera and looking professional and getting a nice suit and stuff. Like, this is back when people just used to wear a suit where it looked like they borrowed their dad's for prom, Like, he was actually trying to look fashionable and look good, right?
Oh, yeah, and he went out of his way to think, he did the little bolo ties for a while, and then he did the continental ties for a while, and he just had a very unique character that was very much him, and he didn't care what anyone else thought, and that was a very strong quality for me.
Right, being as in the modern day, I mean, it's always hard to know what the Gen Z kids think, but some people do now, fully enough, perceive Monte as a villain, especially now he's not like the caster, so he's not doing all the big games and getting the plus side of it, etc. Is there something about his personality doesn't translate to people on the internet? How do you think people are able to malign him in that sense? Because to me, he's just cheeky. I've never really seen him as a villain. He maybe likes to make the odd joke, or he'll be funny with the way he wrecks someone, but I've never seen him as malevolent in any way.
No, but I think he's just very strong, opinionated. When he doesn't like something, he goes all in about why he hates it, and but similarly, if he loves something, he goes all in on why he loves the thing. And this through foreplay, and when you watch him he's just very opinionated, and I think that rubs people the wrong way because most people are not. Most people kind of go with the flow, and they're like, oh yeah, this is nice. This is nice. But Monte says things that provokes thought and it provokes emotion. And I think that makes people uncomfortable. Hence why he's a villain.
Right, one thing I do want to ask about is, since you're working with him and you're married to him and now you even have a family, that means it's not just you're my boyfriend or my husband. You have to go where he goes. You had to go to LA for the Overwatch League. Now you're back in Korea. There was a time when we were doing Flashpoint. No one knew where we would be. Maybe that would be in LA. Maybe we in different parts. Obviously, we had that time during COVID. We had to go off to London, to Twickenham, be in that stadium. What has that part been like? Were you someone where, when you married him, did you really do the thing of right, wherever you go, I'm just going to have to be there. I don't have total control of my own life anymore. What's that aspect like?
when he proposed to me, even before I said yes, I had said, I will promise I will go where you need to go.
Okay. Romantic.
And
I like it.
I said, I will go where you need me to go, and I will support you. And he goes, so is that a yes? Because I hadn't actually answered him. Okay. And I was like, yes. I say yes, but also, we talked a lot early in our relationship, and it was like, I understand that your job will take you to places, and I understand that, you're not the 9-to-5 guy.
Sure.
And I fully know this going into this relationship. And but yeah. Joke's on him, because he can do LFN anywhere. He had to follow me to Korea, and here we are.
Ah, right. Because I was going to actually ask that question, which is also the interesting thing is, even though it looked like you guys were set to be in America for a long time, because then he was working with Flashpoint, which was based there, and we were going to have a season there every year. Somehow, a couple of years later, for whatever circumstances, you're back in Korea anyway, because it's the situation with the company where they sold the house up and you moved back, and now you get to see the other side of the family. That was kind of cool to go back there again. I mean, it's basically what you've been doing your whole life at this point.
Yeah, I love it here. I never wanted to move back to the States. Remember, when I moved to Korea, I was like 27 years old, and I made the conscious choice to move and not go back.
Right.
And I was like, I am perfectly happy being in Korea. And we, years later, I meet Monte and we're dating, and then he's like, yeah, I'm going to have to go back to the States for Overwatch League. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going with you unless there's a ring on my finger, because I'm not just dropping my entire life and following some boyfriend, back to America where I don't really want to be, just for you to, like, a couple months in be like, oh yeah, let's break up. I'm like, no. So then he put a ring on my finger, and I was like, fuck, I guess I'm going to LA. But yeah, if it was up to me, we would have stayed here the entire time.
No, this is something maybe people don't realise. As I say, some people might aspire to live in LA or to be, where all the things are happening in the West. But I always got the vibe you and Monte would be in Korea the whole time. Like, when I used to talk to Monte when I first went there, sounded to me like he had no plans to ever move back to the West. Obviously, it's when he was happily doing the job on LCK and all that jazz. You could see that could run for years and years. And I know in your case, when we had that little crew of people there, it's actually kind of sad when you're the ones that stay and then people gradually go back and you wonder, are they ever coming back? I mean, the joke is I actually did this myself to people like Wolf. I think when I left, and at the time I planned to go back because I was just living there, and I told Wolf something like, I'll see you in like 2 months or something. And then the joke is about a year later, one of these guys was like, are you ever coming back? I was like, probably not now, actually, mate. Probably that ship sailed, I'm afraid. I should have told you, but things happen in the meantime, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm just in Europe now, it's over. But when you're the ones that are there in the outpost, as it were, I actually always felt like you guys would be there for 20 years. You never had like the homesickness in that same way, right?
Oh, this is home. This is home. When we went back, it was almost like reverse culture shock.
Right.
And yeah, even for Monte, he was like, "Oh my God!" Like when we would go back to Colorado, sometimes he's like, "Man, I forgot how American this is." But no, we've got a good thing here, and I think right now in our time in our lives, it's a good time for us to be here. Just in terms of financial situation and for our kids, and my parents live very close to here, so they help us out a lot, and right now, at the point of this recording, our kids are, almost 2 and almost 6. And so it is nice to have that kind of help. Also, schooling is cheaper for kindergarten and daycare here. In general, it just makes more sense. In 2 or 3 years, we do look back, are planning to go back, because once Max becomes higher elementary school, middle school level, the schooling is not great. And
right.
don't want to put him in that situation. So I don't know if people resonate with being a parent so much, but once you're a parent, I feel like your priorities shift in that you want to do what's best for your kid, and it doesn't really mean what's best for you.
Sure.
And so yeah. So I think Monte feels that too, and he realizes like this is a good situation here. Also, he works. I'm in his office right now doing this interview with you, and it works. He can run LFN from here, do all his shows. We have access to the things that we need. And yeah, the time zones kind of suck, but other than that.
By the way, I can also confirm one thing you actually said even long before you ever had a kid is you did always say you actually wanted to be a mom and you wanted to have a bunch of kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just innately knew it would work for you. Is it how you imagined that and hoped it would be?
When I was younger, I wanted like 4 or 5 kids.
Okay.
So that's not happening, and I am very grateful I have 2. But yes, I've always wanted to be a mom. And I feel like my personality and all my training with all the esports players and kids I've met over the years have helped me learn patience and helped me figure out the best way to speak to my child, because these are all the things that I have done in my career as an educator and also as a esports personality.
Sure. By the way, one thing I actually referenced this in that little video I made where I was explaining to like newer fans who you are. One thing I told a little story about I hadn't told anyone publicly was when I had one of my first like scandals or cancellations, which look, that one was totally on me. The day before I went to an event in Poland, I did go on a StarCraft podcast and basically explain all the things I think suck about Poland and why it's shit. Fly there and then just be like, what the hell? I'm fired from the event and everyone Polish hates me now. Like, look, I get it. Looking back, that wasn't one of my finest moments, might have made a misstep or 2 there. I acknowledge that one. I understand that. But at the time, right, when you're in the whirlwind, like we're talking about the thing with the Spitfire, when you're in the whirlwind of everyone's just hating on you online, and if you open any bloody app open, it's just all people like unalive yourself and like really crazy shit. What's really actually, just one thing I relate to, is it is a really isolating experience. You just feel like, what, does everyone just hate me now? Am I just like the number one villain in the world for doing something like mild social faux pas, basically? And as I told the story, you were actually one of the only people who actually just like sent me a message that wasn't about any of that shit. You were just like actually trying to like be compassionate and check I was okay, etc. Which in that moment, by the way, unfortunately a lot of people don't. They either join the bandwagon or they just think, fuck, I'm not going to do that. Like, bloody let that play out. And they stand back, as it were. And I can tell you, it actually does. That counts for a lot when people in rare moments like that, when you're down, sort of give you the little message. It might not seem like much, but I wanted to ask, is that just who you are as a person? Was I lucky in that moment? What happened?
Yes. The whole, I care about my friends, Duncan. And
okay.
And I think over the years that I've known you, like you have shown me nothing but your genuine self, and you've always been very honest with me, and I appreciate that, and I see what kind of friend you are to Monte, and you getting all that hate, like, that sucks. Like, I don't want my friends feeling that way. Of course not. And I want to make sure that you're okay. At least like I know you're used to it, kind of. But you're also a human being, and I don't think anyone deserves that. Like, I don't think the people who write those awful things either have no idea what it feels like to be the target, or they do know what it feels like, and that's why they're doing it to you. Right. But I think most people don't realize how hurtful words can be.
Yes.
Even if you did put it on yourself and you did fuck up, sure, but no one deserves to be told the things that we've been told. And because at the end of the day, like, those things linger, and of course I care about you, dude, so I wanted to make sure you're okay.
By the way, along these lines, so I do have a question that leads to, which goes like this. Believe it or not, this is where you know history was made. I never have really ever had to sit down and be like reflective about like, how do I present myself to the world? What's my social media like? Because my style before was, I just brute forced it. I did whatever the fuck I wanted. I said whatever I wanted. I even used to do that thing, which I now realize is probably a mild mistake, which is when people misunderstand you, instead of being like, well, actually, that's not at all what I meant, guys. I just meant this and correct it. I would be like, I don't owe them an explanation. I would do that like ego thing, you know, which makes it worse, sadly, because you double down and you get more stubborn. And then, you know, perceptions of you get out of control that maybe were never even true, and you've allowed them to sort of get worse in the vacuum of not saying anything. But one thing that did make me realise I have to be at least a tiny bit responsible, I'm not that responsible even so, but a tiny bit responsible, was actually when I realised, wait a minute, actually now, because I'm directly in business connected through Flashpoint with people like Monte, or now obviously doing all the LFN network shows, like actually the things I say do have an impact on other people. And so luckily me and you were friends anyway before, because I did always used to wonder, actually, I hope I'm not the guy where it's like, fucking Monty's friends buddy said something again on the internet, right? We have to do all this for another week. Like there's more consequences than just me hitting enter now, I realise. It can actually impact other people. And obviously in our industry especially, people are a little bit like high school where they'll be like, why are you hanging around with this person who said this thing? And you're like, I didn't say it. And you're like, but you can't do that. You have to kick them out the group. There's a bit of that like pressure. Has it been an interesting ride in that sense? And put it this way, Monty once said this in an interview, something like, yes, it's certainly interesting to be Thorin's friend and work with him for the same reasons, because you never know where it's going to go next. So has it been an interesting adventure? Has it been all right?
Thorin, I married MonteCristo.
True.
Do you understand? Like, what was it? Who's the professor at Huggle? Was it? My Harry Potter lore is awful. The happy one. But basically, they were like, "Oh, the happy house, like the nice one. What are they called? The Hugglepuff or
Hufflepuff or something? I don't know. Not
the Hufflepuff or something like that." They're like, Susie's like Hufflepuff, and she's marrying Snape. Like,
all right.
That's kind of
okay.
That was the analogy that people were saying. They're just like, "Wait, what? That person is marrying that person?" Because on the outside, I think he and I seem very different. But what people don't know is, you know, on a deeper level, we are very similar. But yeah, like, you know, sure, I get that a lot. It's like, oh, you're friends with Thorin, so you must hate X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, I guess. You know, you married Monte, so you must believe everything that Monte stands for. And I'm like, if that's what you wish to believe, you know. Forget all the years of everything I've ever done and said on my social media, but just the fact that, you know, Monte said this one thing and I happen to be his wife, like, nixes everything in the past.
Along those lines, though, I have an obvious question. It's just one I've never heard anyone ask you for obvious reasons, which is, as of right now, since, as you said, your kids are like roughly 6 and 2, they're still young enough now to where, in theory, this part of the internet doesn't have to exist to them. Maybe it never will, but that one day they are going to be old enough where, one, they can do a Google search, or two, who knows, maybe they become gamers, maybe they're part of some community. What have you actually thought about how you're going to explain to them, like, I mean, put it this way, I have a hard time to this day. I often say to people, I'm like famous, but in a very niche way, where you either would know me and then you know who I am, or just like, oh, you wouldn't know me at all. So I don't even know. Do I say I'm like a Z-list celebrity? Am I even? But in a niche way, I am very famous to some people, but it's a very complicated way to explain it. So how would you explain to them, like, Monty's personality, his persona? Some people hate him on the internet for weird things. How have you ever thought about how this conversation is going to go?
So this generation has grown up on YouTube, right? And so Max just thinks Dad is a YouTuber.
Okay. That's not too bad.
Like, yeah, it's like, oh, Dad makes YouTube. Oh, he does cooking shows. Okay. Dad watches movies and talks about them. Okay. You know, it's because he watches a lot of like Minecraft stuff, right, and he watches, you know, Roblox stuff. And it's like, yeah, you know, that guy who talks about this, it's kind of like that. But Dad talks about these games and Dad talks about these movies. It's like, oh, okay. So I feel like this generation of kids, because they're so used to online content, that it's not that big of a deal.
Oh, okay. By the way, are you someone where would you actually be open if your kid really did say, I actually want to be a pro gamer? Would you be open to the idea? Would you warn them? What would your reaction be?
If he was really, really good and I saw potential, then I would let him at least try to fulfill that dream. If he just wants to be a pro gamer but he sucks at it, I would tell him no. I don't even want to bother. We're not going down that road.
By the way, since you are both Korean and American, as you say, do you have a little bit of the tiger mom in you? Are you stern? Do you have standards you expect people to live up to? Have you got that more American warmth and you're a little bit more soft? How do you balance it?
I'm not sure. I don't think Max is old enough yet. No, I think Monte's more tiger mom than I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Monte is a little more like, Max, I expect this of you, and you should be doing this. And I'm like, come here, baby.
Okay.
So, I don't know, but it's hard to say because, he's like in kindergarten. And both of our kids are really smart, and they're very eloquent. And so, Max is very much me in personality, and Orion is very much Monte. So it's really fun to see how that will pan up as they get older.
One thing I've noticed in life from my own experiences is I do think that the way that you model the way you see the world will then absolutely directly impact like the relationships you have with people. So I'll give you an example. A lot of the people I've helped in esports, I realized years later from just thinking about it, I kind of did model it. Like if I had brothers, like the ones that I'm the mentor of, I'd treat like the little brother, and I'm trying to see him come up and make it on his own, but I'll help along the way. Oh, but there's also people, I always tell people this, to me, Richard Lewis is like my older brother. He's always taking care of me, even though it seems like we're just mates. He's always been the one where it's more like he knows when it's like leave him out of that thing or leave him alone. He has like that. He has a bit of a sort of like a like I say, an older brother vibe where he sort of takes your arm around you, etc. In your case, you did always used to even directly joke that you were the esports mom and you would treat these kids in a way where you were like helping them and showing them how to look their best to the world. Do you now, does that seem now like you always wanted kids in that regard? Like has having kids filled that gap for you? Do you not need to do that in esports anymore?
Oh, I definitely don't want to do that in esports anymore. I'm more than happy to just do it for my own kids. But again, like I said, I've always wanted to be a mom, and I enjoy being that mothering, nurturing character. And I'm glad that along the way I was able to provide that for some esports players, and especially like I think about the esports players who were in LA and they left everything that they knew to come out there and all the comforts of home, and they can't speak the language, and it's hard. And if I was able to make their stay in America at least a little bit more comfortable, then I've done my job.
I feel like for specifically to be a parent, it feels like the LFN stuff we've done, the work has actually somewhat been good, because obviously now you guys can all live in Korea again together. Monte, in theory, actually, especially because of the new change, can even spend time with his kids on the weekend. He's not as limited by whatever the gig would be. But there is an alternate timeline. Could have been Owl, could have been something else, where he might still be a commentator now. Maybe he would still be doing the equivalent of the 9 to 5 and coming in on set days, and you have times when you couldn't be do you prefer this lifestyle for him? Would you have been fine with him still being a commentator and have a family on the side?
I have promised him I will follow him whatever he needs to do.
Okay.
And so I'm a very flexible person, and we would have made it work regardless. I appreciate that he has time on the weekends to hang out with the kids. I appreciate that he's flexible, that we can have lunch. He works from home. So I see him during the day and we can have lunch together. We can go to the gym together. We can, run errands together if we need to. And even for a married couple, he and I are always together. And I like that. He's my favorite person. So I enjoy spending time with him and, brainstorming new ideas for LFN. And sure, I'm not LFN, but in a way I am, So this is kind of our project you included, and it's been really fun to watch LFN grow from what it is and to evolve. You know,
Sure.
what it started from and where it's going, and have the network grow along with us and where we are in life, I think is wonderful. The flexibility that a podcast network can have is fantastic, and the fact that you guys own it. You know what I mean?
That's awesome,
Like,
yeah.
there's no one you need to report to except each other. And
Yes.
and I think what you had said before is, like, you know, you are more mindful now of like how you present yourself, because you know it affects your friends and the people you actually do care about,
Sure.
as opposed to like some boss in a corner office somewhere, you know?
Even though you said earlier on that you're not really like in esports now, I was going to say this, like, even when we did Flashpoint, obviously you were there almost every day except when you were having your kid. You were like helping with running that stuff. You came to the season 2 with LFN. You've done stuff behind the scenes. You are still connected in a way to esports. Do you feel like it's a bit different from what it used to be?
A lot different. It's yeah, esports is it's a lot different, I think. And I think going to events and being with the people, being with the casters, being with the fans and stuff, like that part of it is, I still love it. You know, if you were doing an event and you invited us to come out to do something, like, sure, I would love to go. I still love that buzz of the audience cheering, and like, it's wonderful. But just like, how do I explain? I enjoy being a fan and knowing what I know. The deeper you get into any industry, you see all the not so nice things.
Sure.
And because I've seen it before, I don't really want to deal with it again. And so I'm more than happy to be a fan again of esports and a fan of Counter-Strike, League of Legends, whatever it is. I think like 2 years ago, Monte and I went to a finals, an LCK finals. Like, my parents watched the kids, and so we went out to Tamashil, and it was great. You know, it was fun. We were just in the crowd, and we got to see the casters, say hello to old friends, and we went home. And I think I enjoy that. I think if I had another chance to get community together to do, you know, dinner and PC bang kind of ordeal, like, I would. I think that part of it's fun. But yeah, I think I want to just like it on a superficial level at this point in my life.
Do you ever wonder what the path not taken would have been, what life would have been like if you'd have never stumbled into the esports world and you'd have just been doing presumably whatever you were doing back when you were doing English teaching? Do you ever wonder what would life be?
It's like the sliding doors situation, right?
Yeah.
Or was it Butterfly Effect? Or I don't know. I forget, one of those movies. Yeah, I guess so. Kind of. There are a lot of things where I think I kind of wish I had done X, or
Okay.
I wish, you know, like, for example, I wish I had, like, I talked to people who have worked on a cruise ship and have just sailed for years.
Okay.
And I wish I had gotten a chance to do that, where I can just sail the world and work on a cruise ship and meet a bunch of new people all the time, and like go to different ports and stuff like that. And obviously I can't do that now because I
Sure.
kind of have responsibilities. Yeah, so I think about stuff like that. I wonder what it would have been like if I didn't come to Korea, but I went to a different country to teach English instead. And would I have found esports at that point? Because I wouldn't have been watching or going to CoX to watch
Right.
StarCraft, right? But I mean, it is what it is. I guess I don't really dwell so much on it. You know, had I never gone to WCG 2013, like, what would have happened or whatever? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'd be married to some Korean 9-to-5 dude
Some salary man, right? Okay.
with like getting plastic surgery and stuff. I don't know. Like, you know, maybe.
By the way, maybe you can actually address that as an aspect. I'll just ask two very naive questions. One, why is it so pervasive for people to do the plastic surgery there? And two, did you ever consider it yourself? Would you ever have done that? I mean, if you want to work in Korea, in theory, people might even say it's almost a precursor to some degree.
Plastic surgery is almost like, I want to say it's this equivalent of going out and getting a tattoo, getting a
right,
putting your hair, dyeing your hair all crazy or whatever. Like, if it's the way how you feel about how you look. And so if you don't like your eyes, like, go and fix it. If you don't like your jawline, go and fix it. So I think it's nice to look pretty. And so people do that. And I actually, do I just share this on a video? Like, so over the years, if you've noticed in my interviews and such, I am rather top heavy. And last year, I actually got a boob reduction.
Okay.
And that has been wonderful because my shoulders and back no longer hurt. And, it was just one of those things. Like, I had my baby. It had been almost 1 year. I knew I wasn't going to do any more of that. So went to a place, got a consult, and just, got the surgery done. It's pretty easy. And I feel like it's so not taboo to get plastic surgery here that you can just be like, oh yeah, and I got this done. And people be like, oh yeah, that's cool. I got this done, It's very socially acceptable because I understand the Western notion of like, love yourself for who you are and like love what you were born with and stuff. But yeah, if you're born with it and you can enhance it, if that's the case, why are you working out? If that's the case, like, why are you trying to make muscles on your body or like doing a diet to be slimmer or like dyeing your hair? It's the same concept to me anyway. So, if you have the means and the time to do it and it's like, hey, I worked out, but I want more of a butt lift or, then go get it done, whatever.
By the way, I know for you as well, the funny thing is people obviously love to have that eyelid surgery. You just already have eyes that look like that, right? People used to think you had the surgery, right?
I have naturally, they're like inner eyelids though. So like when I'm tired, they come out more and like, no, I have double eyelids. Yes.
By the way, do you actually get the sense, I've never actually asked Monty what he sees in the future of that. Do you get the sense that in some sense there will always be esports in your life? Do you think Monty will just keep doing it? Will he be a lifer in esports, do you think?
I think he'll still dabble in it. For as long as you guys do Four Horsemen, I'm sure he will still continue to be part of it. Because Monty, again, is one of the few people who are just incredibly passionate about esports and the industry. And it's like, this is the industry that we helped shape and mold over like 25 years now, and it's, even if he's not a part of it in a major way, I think he'll always be interested because, we still like games, and where he likes the gameplay, storyline, and, analysis, I like esports for the community and the players and, the more human level, I guess. So we like it for different reasons. We still play games. Monty plays games with Max. They've been, Max is starting to learn how to play with a controller and, he is a gamer.
By the way, one thing I've never asked you about is, since Monty, and he'll obviously totally admit this, himself was a fan of like Brood War and the GOM era, and when people like Tasteless were there, and that was before Monty worked in esports. That's when he was just becoming like, like a scene person in the Warcraft scene, but on like an amateur level, right? In a way, I've always thought it's cool that when you watch the interviews, if you're like a nerd, like I can tell you, it was the same with Smix in StarCraft 2. Like you would have thought the Team Liquid Forums was like her simp fan club. Everyone was in love with her. Everyone, oh my God, she's a woman and she knows esports. She knows all the players and everything, right? It's kind of cool that Monty actually like literally got to marry you. Like, that's pretty dope. It's like he was a fan first. Does he ever actually acknowledge that? It was true though. It's kind of true.
I make fun of it all the time. He watched me on GOMtv when he was studying in Ireland, and years later came to Korea and ended up dating me. So
I think it's a cool story. Yeah, that'll be in the movie.
he's a fanboy.
Yeah.
You know.
Right at the end,
You
of
guys
this,
think MonteCristo is you guys think MonteCristo
suave,
is
everything.
this,
Yeah, of course.
This guy in League of Legends that like all this stuff, great analyst and really cool and stuff, but he was just a big fanboy.
Aren't we all deep down though? Aren't we all? At the end of the interview, here's the last question I have for you. Is if you really do feel as though you're not as connected to esports, normally I ask people to give like a final message. Can you give a message? Like, what would you want people who either were old school fans back in the day, they were on Team Liquid, or maybe they were in the OGN Legion that used to stay up at night, or maybe they just followed your career briefly whenever you would pop up on the news feed or in an interview or on camera or whatever. What would you like people to think at the end of this interview or hear from you as a final message? And then is there anyone you want to thank or say hello to?
I want to thank all those people who may still remember me. Just recently I got someone message me on Instagram telling me that they really enjoyed all the work that I've done and stuff. And so I get that every once in a while. But thank you so much, like over the years, supporting and like watching my content and, just being a part of the cool community that I fell in love with. I don't know the state of fandom now, and I don't know where everyone's at, but in the peak of my esports passion, #passion, thank you guys for making it so awesome. And, it was an honor, and I'm very happy that I was able to be one of the first people to bridge that gap and bring you Korean esports to the West. I'm glad if in any way I shaped or helped shape where esports is in terms of where Korean esports and Western esports are and how they mesh together. I'm glad I played a role in that, and if you remember me still, thank you. And I guess that's about it. And you know what? Keep loving esports for reasons that are your own.
Sure.
If you love games, just love the game for what it is. And because it's people like you who are genuine and passionate, who make the communities wonderful.
감사합니다.
감사합니다.
If you've heard that I'm a bad man, it's only in the Jamaican sense. Well, you know what? Here's my posse that's keeping me held down. And that's, of course, my Patreon community, the Illuminati. So this video and the others on my channel are brought to you in association with Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Ben Glass, Toucan, Nikki, Jason, Jensen Gore. A special thanks goes out always to my main man, Jerky's Minion, and American Yone. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to take part in one of those lengthy donated discussions with me where you set the topics? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming interview subjects are? Maybe you want to ask me a question in my video AMA? Well, if any of the above perks tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Illuminati today, where at the Patreon link in the description box below. Booyah!